AI agents are doing in the real world today. What you hear in the news, what you might think of hype versus what's actually happening. And my name is Beena Amanat. I lead the Deloitte Global AI Institute, which is really looking at what the nuances are of applying AI in the real world. When you move from research to enterprise world, what are the complexities that you need to think about? So, I'm joined with an esteemed set of panelists here today. We'll start with a quick round of introductions. Let's start with Bobby.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Bobby Blumoff, and I'm the CTO of Akamai Technologies. Been there for a long time, done a lot of different roles. I joined the company in the summer of '99, and maybe that makes me a bit of an anomaly these days, but I've stayed with Akamai for 26 and a half years now.
All right, hey, good afternoon everyone. My name is Chandra Nair, Senior Vice President of Technology, leading data, AI, innovation at Lowe's, the home improvement retailer.
I'm Linda Yao. I work at Lenovo, and my mandate is to help enterprise customers of all sizes, as well as cloud providers, to adopt emerging technology. And lately, in recent years, that has been everything from hybrid cloud to Gen AI to robotics. And so very excited to see all of y'all here.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Dunn. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Cephalable. We're an on-device agent platform that helps you control, create, and automate across all the other apps and tools you use.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Ennis. I'm the Global AI Chair for LG Nova's coalition, sponsored by LG Nova Coalition of Innovation, and I'm also the CEO of AgentsGeo.ai, a platform for AI visibility and governance.
Thank you. As you can see, we have a variety of industries and experts joining us today. So let's start with the burning question. What is real about AI agents? Can each one of you share a real-world successful deployment of AI in the real world, and what are some of the challenges or concerns that you've seen, and what are the results that you've seen? And even if it's successful, what are the metrics that you have in place? I'm going to call out on Chandu to kick us off.
Okay, it was not a line, but I'll take that first one. But look, I think in our world, we have about 1,700 stores. And these are large footprint stores. If you've ever visited a Lowe's store, our associates are always helping the customers. But you do have customers that is calling our stores. In fact, we get about 50 million calls to our stores, not to our call centers, but to our stores. And usually it's a distraction for an associate who's helping a customer to go into that and go behind the desk and take a call and address that, which they try to do. So we put a voice agent out there for our customers who are making their calls to our stores. And we've been able to contain, at this time, about 30% of those calls through that agent who can respond to any types of questions around product knowledge or concrete mix, or what is the time that the store is open, or different kinds of things. We are continuing to learn and make the agent better, because we would want a lot of those calls to be addressed by that agent, and that way the associate in the store can work with the customers right in front of you.
That's a great example. Linda?
Sure. Just a show of hands, how many of y'all in the audience use a Lenovo ThinkPad or a Moto phone, maybe a ThinkSystem server, ThinkStation workstation? Awesome. So a good proportion of you all. The work that goes on behind the scenes to get that product or device into your hands is all done through our supply chain and manufacturing. So Lenovo is shipping one device, at least one device, every single second of every day. And so one of the successful implementations we've had internally is something called iChain. We use it to automate many, many aspects of our supply chain. And we've seen real results like 42% reduction in logistics costs, 58% reduction in quality-related defect costs, improvement in finding replacement parts. So that is something that is at a really massive global scale, where previous to the current moment, it would have taken us a lot more effort and a lot more cost, quite frankly, to deploy that level of automation and agentic workflow.
That's amazing. Great example. Alex?
Well, I mean, it feels shameless, but it's like Cephalable deployments are kind of the biggest successes. We mostly play in the space of like privacy and security and AI, folks that want to get stuff done and get all the productivity gains, but don't want to compromise on the data challenges and security issues. We tend to help companies do a lot with offsetting shadow AI. So folks that are using things like their own GPT subscriptions and basically leaking information out. So we work with folks like Wells Fargo, Salesforce, and their team members use Cephalable basically to do things like generate emails, rewrite documents, create workflows that get automated across their actual desktop environments. And a lot of the work we do is actually with partners like Lenovo, because if you're buying like an AI PC or Copilot Plus PC, that's where we basically accelerate the most. We help you get the most done, and you're not compromising now on the performance side either of AI running on a laptop.
Sarah? One of my favorite examples is the Walmart Trend to Product tool that reduces the production from R&D phase all the way to manufacturing from 6 to 8 months to 6 to 8 weeks. And the reason behind it is that they're doing the risk management really well. The human in the loop is exactly where it's supposed to be with the human judgment between where a mood board is created and voted on to where the tech pack is sent to the manufacturing. And I was recently actually on a session with OpenAI head architect on the same topic, and we all agreed that one of the biggest barriers as enterprises roll out agentic system is the evals, so the risk management through evals. And so I think that's something that enterprises should really look into, the right eval.
Yeah, I think that that's such a great point about governance and humans in the loop. Even with something like the manufacturing AI, things like a tariff hitting you out of nowhere, right? Or like tax implications that are coming online. All of that, the AI can provide some dynamic reallocation, but you don't want to like swap your supply source from one continent to another without a human in the loop and looking at that. So that's kind of a great point.
Yeah, human in the loop is great, but the risk for it is that it could become a bottleneck. In the same example with Walmart, if they didn't do the right evals, as they go from 100 designs to 100,000 designs or 10,000 designs, if their evals aren't right, if the mood boards are based on fringe styles, then the human in the loop is now the bottleneck. So at the root cause, the make or break of the agentic systems is the eval.
So true, Bobby?
Yeah, let's see, so at Akamai we've really been using AI really since the advent of deep learning. We've used it in all of our cybersecurity products. It's a really good tool. As you probably know, deep learning is great at finding patterns that humans would otherwise miss. So when it comes to something like cybersecurity, where you're looking at large amounts of, say, internet traffic flows, and you want to identify, what's normal, what's abnormal, what's benign, what's malicious, what's human, what's bot, deep learning is perfect for that. And I guess you could call that agentic in the sense that once you've made a classification, you would then take an action, like block the stuff that you don't want. But I'm also guessing that that's not really what the question is about. We're looking for sort of kind of LLM-based agents. And when it comes to that, we actually, we've rolled out quite a few things in various groups. But at this stage, I would say most of them are in very niche areas and maybe only partially rolled out. The one exception is coding agents. And this came up, by the way, I was at a conference, it was only a few months ago, and this exact question came up, and we were all talking about it with actually a lot of people, a lot of different companies represented. And example after example came up, using it in this function, using it in this function, using it in that function, and every time whenever you sort of probed in a little bit farther, you find out, well, it's actually not really agentic, it's not really taking any action, or it's really just in a pilot stage. And so you kind of universal, this was at a conference, this is just one sample from this conference. The only example that withstood scrutiny in terms of really widespread use was coding agents. And it's the same thing at Akamai right now. And personally, I find that wildly disappointing. Because we've had ChatGPT for over 3 years now, right? November 30th of 2022. So it's been well over 3 years now that we've had, LLMs way predate that. So we've had this technology for a long time, and even the ability to use LLMs and agents goes back a bit of a ways too, right? I mean, you have to have structured outputs and things like that. But so we've had the ability to do agents with LLMs for a while, and it's still remarkable to me that we've made as little progress as we have. Every time I go onto a website and I find myself struggling to navigate through pages and links and menus, I'm thinking, well, why isn't an agent just doing this for me? And I'm guessing most of you maybe have the same experience, but how often do you go to a website and just have an agent do everything for you? Or you can just have a conversation and say, I want to do X, Y, Z, and you have a conversation that gets everything done for you. That just almost never happens. Why? Maybe I should pause here, because I want to talk a little bit more of that. But the short answer, in my opinion, I blame the hype machine. I blame the AI companies that have been selling us a bill of goods that's completely bunk, and the hype machine that's selling us a completely bunk bill of goods that's getting in the way of realizing the promise of what I think LLMs used in the right way could deliver for us.
So Bob, that's a great point. But I do want to come back, and I know Sarah, you mentioned it in your response, right? The results that you saw, right? From 6 to 8 months to 6 to 8 weeks, reducing it down. I would like to revisit each of the examples that you gave and talk a little bit about the actual results and metrics, or even how you define what, how you're going to measure success. What's the ROI? For each of you have unique examples. If you can talk a little bit about, for each of your examples, what was the real result, right? And how did you know to define the ROI in those metrics? And did it change over time as you built, when you originally designed the agent versus when after you deployed it? So maybe we'll go in the same sequence, and Chandu, will start with you.
Yeah, no, I can take that, and I think I want to connect back to what Bobby was saying as well, because I think one thing, if it's not obvious, is I think anybody who's working in the space, I think there is different definitions of agents itself. Like, I think and fundamentally it goes down to like a trust factor. Because when you have to work with agents, you have to have a certain level of trust established to give it the keys to go do things. So what we tend to do, because of the push and the hype and everything that needs to happen tomorrow, is to build workflows that is instrumented, and we tend to obviously have human in the loop, which will have heavy-handed human in the loop to do the same stuff, which actually is, you're not reducing the cost per task really by trying to do that. But I think it's a maturity curve around how you do it. Now I'll connect back to, like the example that I gave around the voice agent in the stores. So for everything that we're doing in the space, we are trying to decouple into two different types of metrics. One we call is, leading metrics and lagging metrics. So the leading metrics are key things that is it actually understanding and is it steering, the action in the right direction. So what I mean by that is, is it able to respond back? Is the quality of the response good? Can I contain the number of calls that comes to the store, and how is that done? If I can contain that, then can I actually try to drive, upselling, or can I drive, what are the financial metrics, which is typically the ROI type of metrics that you want to get to. Those are a bit more lagging metrics, but before you can do that, you kind of have to establish the leading metrics, which is the containment rates, a few other quality metrics. Then you try to establish eval frameworks, we talked about it, to say, hey, can you actually set up an eval framework so every time it does something, I can trust this thing. And then once you have it, you have a little bit more autonomy for the tool, so that it gradually grows, and that gets to your lagging metrics, which is your financial metrics, and that is a process. I think circumventing that process because of the hype, because you need to create value, and there's a lot of pressure from, from all the hype that you see in the media to create value, or say you have hundreds of thousands of agents. I don't think we have a mechanism yet to properly get on and build trust with the agents yet. That's my take on it.
Linda, what did you see in terms of ROI?
Yeah, I think, to your point, there's a lot of fragmentation and dispersion around how these AI systems get implemented. My example earlier was around manufacturing operations and logistics, which is a huge function. So you're right, there could be a ton of point metrics, hundreds and thousands of point metrics that we can measure. So where I like to look is at the ultimate result. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but when the big tariff regimes, big tax changes hit the industry just a year ago, if you guys can remember, our manufacturing AI agents were able to work together as a system. And if you look back into kind of Lenovo's financials, Lenovo's disclosures, we were hit a lot less severely and really weathered that storm. We're able to maintain kind of steady operations and financials through that period. That's not easy because we operate in 180 markets, so that is a ton of cross-border transactions, both physical and fiscal. And again, it is only with something like AI where we have the ability to get not just that detail-oriented in terms of every single market, how do we treat that shipment, how do we treat those components, but also then combined in the bigger picture of how we should be optimizing across that global system.
So true. And Alex, you get to work with a variety of agents. So tell us what are the different kind of metrics or ROI measures that you've seen across a variety of agents that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we look at. One, like John said, it's sort of like what is the end, right? Like what is the sort of end picture? And I'll give you one example of that. Like we work with a large Canadian retailer. They have a big e-commerce platform. We're not building their on website agent, but we're helping their team members get stuff done faster. If you're familiar with Canada, all content has to be in English and French. And so their current process is the designer's going to design a new product page. They're then going to ship that to the e-commerce team. The e-commerce team is going to start to facilitate that in English first. Then they send all the content to a translation team that does the translations. And then they come back and then they'll find there's layout issues all of a sudden, right? Because we didn't test this at the design stage. And what we started to see was well, how long does that take in the end-to-end process? Is there things that an agent can do to help them out? The answer is, I think an obvious yes. But in the case of using something like Cephalable, it wasn't just throw Cephalable at it, you're going to get your 8x returns across the whole board. We had to figure out where are the changes in that process that need to happen. And so what they ended up doing was using Cephalable to let the designers translate the content directly in Figma, right when they're doing it. So instead of having to go out to an agent or a chat and ask it to do a translation and copy and paste back, or sort of even getting rid of that gap, where they're just saying hey, take this English text, translate it to French over here, and I'm good to go, and now I can make the adjustments, and then I can give it to the team with full translations. Now their translation team is just double checking stuff. They're not having to go through all the content from the beginning either. That's how we get those sort of 8x faster things. It's that not just what can an agent do to speed up that single process of a designer having to do a translation, but where does it make sense to also change those workflow processes in order to make the most of the agents that you have?
And Bobby, what were some of the metrics or ROI that you saw at Akamai?
It's a great question, because I think we've really struggled. I think everybody struggled a bit with metrics. I think in some contexts, I talked about, I started with this idea, for example, using deep learning as a way to, in cybersecurity, for example. And there it's actually fairly straightforward. You've got notions of false positive and false negative, and how many bad things are you catching, things like that. So there, actually, when it comes to things like classification, using AI for classification, there's pretty straightforward metrics. When it comes to agents, which again, I think we want to focus there, it's a lot harder, and there's been a lot of attention on autonomy and automation and productivity. I think most of the things that you're out there hearing are also problematic because people aren't being very clear with the definitions. You've all probably seen the headline where some CEO claims, 30% of our code is now being written by AI. Well, what the hell does that mean? I mean, does that mean that 30% of it was AI assisted? That for example, if you're sitting in front of an IDE writing code and it shows you some autocompletes, you go tab, tab, tab and collect and accept the autocomplete. Was that AI written code? If it wrote some code and then you had to edit it, is that AI written? I mean, what does it even mean when they say something like that? And is it really having an impact on the cost of developing code? So that's problematic. And then the other part of it that really makes me bananas is that there's no attention on the quality part of it. They're just talking about the productivity and automation and things like that, but what about the quality? And personally, my aspirations around most things when it comes to agentic AI aren't even full automation, full autonomy. For example, mostly because I think that's just way beyond what LLMs are really capable of doing. We've talked about human in the loop. What we want is AI agents that are not fully autonomous. I think what we want is AI agents that aren't fully autonomous, but rather assistants that can help you get things done and do what you want to do better. And how do you measure that? I don't know, but it makes me a little crazy that all we're talking about is automation and productivity and not talking about the quality of the work that we're able to produce. AI should help us produce better quality writing or better quality code or better quality customer experiences, not just do it faster or with fewer people. And I don't know why we're lacking any attention on these things.
Alex, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of what it comes down to is as a tech community, we're kind of throwing AI agents at everything. And so that measurement of productivity is you're right, it's such a blanket statement. I think trying to identify like, well, what are the very specific things that this very specific agent in this very specific context might be doing, and you only can even measure how much faster it is, right? The sort of productivity low-level argument, like I saved time or I did this thing faster and therefore I got to do other things, which is still fuzzy. Only if you know like exactly what would have been done otherwise in a very specific scenario. And I think that's what the hype doesn't cover. And when it comes to measuring it, like you need to know what the process looks like otherwise. And it has to be specific to that use case.
Yeah, and that's not just about agentic AI, right? This is true for AI. There's so much hype around it. Like 2 points, right, from what Bobby and Alex mentioned. One is, aligning on just the definition of what what does AI mean for you? What does an AI agent mean for the organization? And then looking at, don't use technology just for the sake of technology. Use it for a specific use case so that there is clear definition of the outcomes of what you're trying to achieve. Linda, did you want to add something?
Well, it just kind of strikes me that Bob and Matt, you both talked about productivity gains, right? And I agree that there is some fuzziness in how we measure that, but I also think that as an industry, we've pretty much agreed that AI, Gen AI, agentic AI can be used to achieve productivity gains at the enterprise level. One of the things that excites me the most, though, is that it's not just about productivity, right? Those enterprise use cases we're deploying that achieve not just productivity gains, but actually expand the top line, right? Where we see revenue uplift, and it's not at the expense of something like customer satisfaction. That is what it's going to take to get these enterprise use cases to stick.
So true. Sarah, did you have to add?
I was just thinking about the Coalition for Innovation. We just published an AI blueprint, and this was a consortium of global AI experts, including Microsoft Office of the CTO, including various enterprises who are in the process of implementing agentic AI. So we listed a couple best practices when it comes to implementing agentic systems, and there are a couple points here. So I think governance being super important, and I can't emphasize that more. It's about having and treating these agentic systems like any other risk in your company, and having proper risk registries for every workflow that you have. And so in the blueprint, we had various frameworks that enterprises can actually leverage to measure, manage, and have this proper governance structure. For example, the NIST RMF framework is somewhere you guys can start if any one of you is looking into having a governance structure. And having governance across workflows. So when you're having these agentic systems, they're all touching various workflows, and having those stakeholders involved as the governance committee and having that structure, I think is really important.
Thank you. So let's switch to best practices. If for enterprises beginning to start their agentic AI journey, what's one piece of advice that you would give to an enterprise, Alex?
And I see. Now, I wanted to add on the governance stuff. Is very importantly, I think one of the biggest best practices, and I'll share a horror story of the opposite, right? We're talking about great enterprise use cases and business use cases for agents. I was talking to a CIO that's now a customer of ours, and they were deploying their own GPT models that were supposed to enable their sales team to be able to like go, look up information and get dashboard stuff built real quick. Super great use case. The problem is that when they built it, they also gave the actual like agent itself universal access to their SharePoint, because they're like, well, this is how we're going to make it so every employee can. And then all of a sudden, like a salesperson was like, what was the last email the CEO got, by the way? And it's like, yeah, here's the last email the CEO got. And it's like, oh, okay, we didn't need to do it that way. We rushed into implementing something before we realized what we needed to do it right. So I think the main thing is either build AI systems in the right context, right? This is where we play. We live on device, that we gather the governance of the data access of your employees, or at least really make sure you know what you're doing around the data governance before you just start deploying tools to try to get those productivity gains that we're all experiencing right now. That's my number one best practice, is like don't botch the security, the privacy, the governance in order to ship something super fast.
So true. Chandler?
I was going to say that has happened to me, by the way, when one of my teams were testing a tool and they added me to the pilot, and and I was asking them a question. And then, when I met the team after, it's like, hey, it looks like you asked this question and didn't respond. It's like, how did you figure out I asked that question? And I'm glad I didn't ask anything personal. But I think the two things that I would add, just to extend on it, one, On the governance side, I think we talked about trust. I think one thing I think is not being looked on with that level of diligence is establishing an identity for your agents, right? So I'll give an example of a different agent we use, which is to reconcile invoices, which is a pain point for a lot of our finance team because a lot of those invoices hit the exceptions when it comes to us. They may not match our contracts or POs, and somebody has to manually go through this for weeks. So we created an agent to do it. Now the question is, there is still a human in the loop to finally cut the payment, but the idea of if it actually makes the wrong inference or is actually cutting out eventually if it's autonomous and has to cut the check, who's responsible for it? Is it the person who built the agent? Is it the person on the finance team who's now using the agent? And how do we even trace what agent actually made that choice and what is the corrective mechanism? So having a proper identity mechanism for agents is extremely critical. And my second point to that is, I think you talked about context. And I think we tend to look at ground truths and knowledge and semantic layer as your context. That is not the context. You need working memories. Just like when you are looking at certain things right now, I may be trained on all kinds of stuff I learned at school, but I'm going to apply myself based on all things that I need to say in this room because I know my working memory is based on I am actually at a conference right now here. So being able to build, I know there's a lot of talk around context graphs, and being able to maintain and manage the context graphs and create working memory for your agents is super important. It's like if you're going to have the agent do the steering on your behalf and act, you really need to have the context of where you are before you do it. So those would be my two ads.
So true, and I can see Bobby's itching to comment on that, so it would Bobby.
Yeah, so a lot to say here, and I guess maybe a lot of the way I'd be framing this is sort of somewhat negative, I guess, just because, again, you heard the framing that I used to start with, the bill of goods that were being sold. And maybe start with sort of an anecdote. So this is a couple of months ago, I was at dinner with my wife, and we're talking about AI, as couples these days do. And I made some comment about the fact that these so-called reasoning models, oftentimes produce answers that are really, appear to be very well reasoned, but they're not actually reasoning. I should come back to that point. That they produce well-reasoned answers without actually doing anything that resembles what you and I would call reasoning. So I made that comment, and she said, "Yeah, don't bet your company on a party trick." I thought, "Oh, that's pretty good." And so I wrote it down in my hand, like, "Cynthia, can I steal that one?" And so I've been using this. So don't bet your company on a party trick. And that's what's happened. That is AI in a nutshell right now. LLMs perform party tricks, and they do it again and again and again, and oftentimes with a corrected output. And I've taken to referring to it as the sour spot. It's sort of the opposite of the sweet spot. And I call it the sour spot is because, as I said, they can produce well-reasoned answers without actually reasoning, and they do it just often enough to fool you into thinking that they actually reason in the way that you and I reason, right? And the reason it's the sour spot is because if they could never do this, we wouldn't ask them to do this ever. We just wouldn't use them, and it wouldn't be a problem. If they could always do it, if there was 4 nines of reliability in terms of their ability to produce a well-reasoned answer, then it wouldn't matter whether or not they're actually reasoning. We wouldn't care. They're giving us the right answer anyway. Who cares if it's really reasoning in the way that we reason? We wouldn't care. But it's right in that middle spot, the sour spot, because they do it just often enough to fool you into thinking they can actually reason. They can't. And that's part of my point about that they're selling us a bill of goods. The nerve to refer to these things as reasoning models is just mind-blowing to me. They don't reason in any way that resembles. Oh, and they refer to them as sort of the beginnings of AGI. Even using the word intelligence in association with something like an LLM, I think it takes a lot of gall to do that. In my opinion, if you want to use the word intelligence in relationship to an LLM, qualify. It's LLM intelligence. It doesn't in any way resemble the kinds of intelligence that you and I have. The kinds of intelligence that we have is multifaceted. In fact, just in general, using the word intelligence, even to refer to us, is very vague because there's so many different types of intelligence. But when it comes to talking about something like an LLM, they have their own unique thing. And if you want to use the word intelligence, LLM intelligence. Anyway, so they can't reason. The notion that these things are called so-called reasoning models, I think it takes a lot of, arrogance to do that, because they're just not reasoning. Anyway, so you've got these things in a sour spot here.
Bring it home, Bobby.
Fooling you into thinking that they can do things that they can't do. And that's the key right there, is to not be fooled into thinking that LLMs can do things that they can't do. Because they actually can do some remarkable things. They are remarkable tools. They're awesome at what they're awesome at. It's just that they suck at everything else. So you have to understand that boundary. There's an education, there's a literacy point that has to happen here of understanding what an LLM fundamentally is, even a so-called reasoning LLM, what it actually is, what it can do, and how to use it in order to build a system that can do interesting things. And that can be done. But you have to use it in the system to perform the task that it's good at performing. Don't ask it to perform the task that it's not good at performing. And so you're still in a world where you can't just expect an LLM to be an agent and solve these problems for you. The world is engineering and design. If you want to build something that's going to be useful for your company, there's no substitute, not even an LLM, for engineering and design. You have to engineer and design a great system. An LLM or multiple LLMs or multiple other AI models may be part of that system, but you're using them only as a component of the system to do what you need to do for that. Anyway, so
Sorry, we need to move on. Sorry. So bring a healthy dose of skepticism.
But this was our
And-
last question, right?
No, we have one big one coming up. So,
Can I comment?
And Linda, we haven't heard from you.
No, I really actually do appreciate Dr. Blumhoff's words of caution and skepticism.
Am I ranting a bit?
No, but I think that you wrapped up with a very good call to action, right? Which is that if the models aren't there for reasoning in the way that we would think of as human intelligence, or they're not good at causal inference, there are a lot of use cases and problems, especially in the enterprise level, that can be solved without reasoning as a human and causal inference. So I think originally the question was, what are the indicators for success, right? Or what are the best practices? When I look at the thousands of use cases that we've deployed with our customers, what really separates the successes from the fast fails is having the end in mind, right? What is it that we want this AI to do? Is it to automate something? Is it to augment a human, right? Is it to administer a process that humans really don't want to do because it's too detail-oriented? That level of kind of design thinking is really going to help expand these use cases and make them implementable. I do want to also kind of give a real example, right? Earlier in the conversation, Chandu talked about the retail service desk, right? People calling up Lowe's Home Improvement and having questions. So at Lenovo, we have the same thing, right? We have people calling our contact centers as well as our offices as an IT service desk. So we have implemented agents across the service desk and the contact centers. And it targets all of those items. Sometimes it administers. Sometimes the agents automate. Sometimes they augment. Sometimes they go help and fix the database and the knowledge base. And from there, we've not only seen the huge productivity gains, right, in terms of like 20, 30% reduction in average call handling time, right, whatever your favorite contact center metric is. We've also seen expansion of the top line, right, because it turns out these agents, whether they are carbon-based or silicon-based, are really good at understanding whether you need a warranty extension, right, whether you need to buy some computing peripheral based on your problem, whether you need to add more memory. In addition, during this period, we've also seen a double-digit increase in customer satisfaction, right? So we're not sacrificing the human experience either. And those are the types of use cases designed with the end in mind where we're seeing the most success.
So know the limitations of the technology, find the right use case, and then you get the right results. Sarah, I know you wanted to comment on this.
I thought we were moving to the last question.
Yes, I know, we got to the last 10 minutes. So I am, I'm really looking forward to all of your answers on the last question. What excites you most, in a very optimistic manner, about, let's leave the room with a level of pragmatic optimism, on what excites you most about where AI agents are headed, or where AI is headed in general? What is it that you're most excited about? What research aspect is exciting you? What's the next technology evolution that you're looking forward to that can help us all move forward in this journey? Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure. So I'm going to switch hats to my startup. So agentsgeo.ai is a platform for enterprise that helps enterprises be understood and referenced and recommended in AI systems. And the reason we looked at this is we are moving through a very interesting era of agentic shopping. OpenAI and Stripe just developed a protocol called Agentic Commerce Protocol, ACP, which means in the very near future, we're gonna have automated shopping. So your buyers could be setting the criteria, and next thing you know, their shopping is done. And so you have to optimize for how AI systems understand and interpret you. And that's where the risk comes in, but here's the risk mitigation to combat it. So I think with agentic AI systems, it's all about governance and risk. And that's why these layers are becoming the 2026 theme, the governance and the intelligence layer between the foundational model and the enterprise applications.
Agentic commerce. Chandu?
Yeah, no, I think I think agentic commerce is definitely something that we're keeping a close eye on as well. But I would try to get us back to I think what Vinay was saying before, which is what you're trying to do. If you use the tool for what it is built for, it does not have the cognitive capabilities of a human brain. It's mimicking some of the ways by which humans are learning things, but it doesn't have that. But now, if you would take that and apply it in the right use cases, what I feel it'll do. Which I believe it will do, is it'll take two things. It'll take the complexity out of all the inefficiencies that happens in a very large enterprise, which if you work in a large enterprise, there's a lot of inefficiencies because of existing systems and processes that happens today, which is a pain point for our customers, right? So now you take all of that, inefficiencies and complexities out, it now creates scale. So what I'm excited about is now you have this, if you use these tools the right way, you have these set of agents that can help you scale your business with infinite context, infinite compute, in a way, and really drive growth of your business. And that to me is the promise. Now we have to work our way there. We don't have all the pieces, all the Lego blocks identified yet, but so is any new technology. So you kind of have to be responsible about how you use it. And then really kind of take efficiencies and levers out of your existing systems and processes and help it to drive the growth of the business.
Thank you. Alex?
I think my answer is what I'm most optimistic about is really around that sort of democratization of compute that we have right now. I think we've seen this squeezing of large language models because in the end, Bobby, to your point, like these are things that just predict the next set of characters to spit out. It does not need to run on a rack of H-series NVIDIA chips for inferencing. Training's a whole other thing. And I think we're seeing this level of compute coming to PCs and to phones that is really enabling like true agentic AI and this sort of human in the loop that we're all talking about sort of the ideal use case. And we're here at CES. A lot of these are being announced, as we all know if you're following the silicon space, from just about everybody that's developing silicon in compute. And I think that's the biggest thing, is it brings down the costs for enterprises. It brings up new opportunities to create things. And it also, I think, just like helps with democratizing the governance side of things and some of the challenges around security. So I can't wait for new lines of CPUs that are coming out or are out.
Awesome. Bobby?
Yeah, let's see. So, for all the sort of comments I've made, LLMs are a remarkable tool, and if used in the right way, they can do remarkable things. And I think one of the things that I think we should expect over the next few years is really a whole new front end to the web. If you really think in terms of the big picture of the web, we've had the same thing for about 30 years now, right? Tim Berners-Lee gave us the World Wide Web about 30 years ago, and he gave us HTML, and we've really used that paradigm now, right? Pages, links, tabs, menus, forms. That's the paradigm we all learned 30 years ago. We've been using that same paradigm for 30 years now. It hasn't really changed. And I think it's time we can do better now. And I think agents can be that change, where rather than having to navigate through links, forms, tabs, menus, it's a conversation, a multimedia conversation. You want to make an appointment to see your doctor. You don't have to remember where to click or how to fill out the form. You just have a conversation. I want to make an appointment with Dr. Rudolph, and it comes back and says, oh, I see you prefer to take your appointments on Tuesday mornings at this office, and then maybe it might show you an image of your calendar with what's open and what's not open, and when Dr. Rudolph has availabilities. You engage in a conversation. You say, okay, let's book, February 4th at so-and-so, and it would go ahead and book it and give you the email. So you no longer have to engage in finding links and forms and menus. You instead have a conversation, a multimedia conversation, not just voice, not just text, a multimedia conversation. The entire web can be replaced, the entire front end of the web can be replaced with this kind of agentic interface. So wipe out the old paradigm, again, pages, tabs, forms, menus, wipe that out and replace it with agents. I think that can be a great improvement, and that is something that LLMs can do, not by themselves, but an LLM built as a component of a system can replace the entire web. We'll see a whole new web front end, and I don't know why we haven't made more progress. Again, I blame the hype machine, but I think we'll get that.
I would say I stop at the internet, right? Like if we use this technology right, and with all combining it with other technologies like computer vision and physical AI, can we actually rethink even how an enterprise is organized, the processes that exist, like even go bigger beyond the internet. That part is very exciting for me. Linda.
Yeah, I totally agree. Look, I'm excited and optimistic because I think enterprise AI is the toolkit that's going to get us back to the 40-hour work week, right? The 40-hour work week has long been a myth, whether you work in the US or you work in Brazil or you work in China or wherever. And I think enterprise AI is exactly that set of tools where it will allow us as employees and as leaders to, only work 80 hours if we choose to, right? Give us the option to do that. And something like that, I think, hasn't existed for a while, and this is something I'm very excited about.
Not to be negative, but I feel like 40 hours a week is going to also backfire with the enterprise AI in terms of changes in recruitment and jobs, and as we all know, so that's something that I think we should balance.
So true, so true. I think, obviously there's a lot of excitement on this panelist about where AI is headed. There's a healthy dose of skepticism, so balance it out. I think one key takeaway for me is, become AI fluent. Define, what an agent means for your organization. Make sure everybody's speaking the same language, so to speak. And there's real use cases today where you can apply AI agents and get real value. But the technology is evolving. There's also hype, so don't fall for everything that you read about. There's real value, but it's balance it out with the hype that you see. For me, what I'm most excited about, I think, is if we can have an AI agent that does laundry, folds the clothes and puts it away. I think I will take it. But
we're a long way away from that.
Yes, exactly.
Again, despite the hype machine, it make you think otherwise, we are a long way from that.
Actually, I think there are a couple laundry doing robots, humanoids, right now.
In how many homes?
Adoption is a different case. And honestly, adoption is also, and I think
they're in the labs, they're doing demos, they're not going to be in the homes for a long
some
time.
countries will adopt it faster than this. I mean, I don't want a robot coming in my house and having machine vision everywhere, everything about me, but I'm sure there's countries and cultures that this may be a replacement made, so.
I will tell you, Bobby, the three women on the panel are very pro laundry doing physical AI, and we believe that it exists.
I'm pro that too.
On that note, we wrap up our session. We're all around, so if you have any questions, we will be around to answer any questions you might have. Thank you all so much for joining us.